So I've played a good amount of Space Marine 2 over the last few days. The developers very generously offered me a code to try a preview build of the game that gave me access to 3 missions, a story mission, 2 multiplayer missions that we could play in all sorts of different difficulties with different loadouts and classes and stuff. So all told, I have a pretty good idea of what Space Marine 2 has to offer, and I'm going to share all of my thoughts in this video with you. Because on the whole, I think the game is really, really solid, and I'm very excited to see how the final product is. But at the same time, there's a couple of little things that were just actively frustrating that I'm going to tell you about. So hopefully the devs can fix it and patch it before the game comes out in early September. That being said, I feel like I also need to disclose that I am what's known in the medical field as a giga nerd. It's an affliction I've been dealing with for a long time. And as part of that diagnosis, I also suffer from a condition known as Warhammer-itis. As you can see from this camera angle, which I've never used before, I've got 2 big glass display cases where I house my Warhammer collections. And as you can see in this shot here, I've got a few armies that I play with. One of them that I main is Thousand Suns, which is actually in Space Marine 2. I also play Chaos Space Marines, Orcs, Necrons, you name it. I probably have some number of models for it. I have a problem. That's what I'm saying, is I have a problem. But the reason I want to bring that up is because I like Warhammer, and I think that's important to know going into this. You know, some people, they'll play a game and it gets like a +1 to the final review score because they're just a fan of the franchise or the setting or whatever. For me, as a fan of Warhammer, it probably gets a +1 just because I'm already interested in the IP. And I want you to know that going in, that's going to paint my opinion of this as we go through it. But I'm going to go through all of it. I'm going to go through the story mission. I'm going to go through the multiplayer stuff. I'm going to talk about the cosmetics. I'm going to talk about DLC. I'm going to talk about balance and how one of the classes is downright terrible and all of the nitty-gritty goodness that goes along with a preview of a game like this. So make sure to like the video if you enjoy it, subscribe for more coverage of games like this, and I'm bad at intros for videos. I don't know how else to set this up. So I guess we'll just start talking about it, or is that what we should do? I guess we should do that. But first, a thank you to the sponsor of this video, Best Buy. Best Buy, as you probably know, is the one-stop shop for all of your gaming needs. And they actually recently reached out to me asking if I needed some more gaming equipment for my gaming setup on the go. And boy, did they ever hook me up. For one, we got a 2 terabyte WD Black NVMe SSD. This is the SN850P for the PlayStation 5, and effectively it allows you to expand the storage on the console so you never run out of storage space, but you still get the ridiculously fast load times because these things are so crazy fast. And they also hooked us up with this big bad boy, the Alienware M16 GeForce RTX 4070 gaming laptop. As I said, this has a 4070 in it, which means that it is capable of running pretty much any modern video game on high settings without breaking a sweat. And also, I mean, this is cool. Look, the alien head lights up. I've actually been using this laptop for the last couple of weeks, not just to edit videos, but also to play those high-end games that I make videos on. And I'll tell you what, having this level of gaming firepower on the go is enough to make a grown man cry. And if you want to get your own gaming haul, Best Buy is the place to go. Not only will they have pretty much anything you could possibly dream of to expand your gaming repertoire, but they also have the best prices and best deals. And seriously, I shop at Best Buy all the time, not just because I worked there many moons ago, so I mean, it's near and dear to me, I suppose. But also because I just think their lineup and prices are the best around and they can't really be beat. So what else is there to say? So again, thank you to Best Buy for sponsoring this video, for hooking us up with all sorts of new gaming hardware that we're going to be using in the production of videos and things that you'll see on this channel moving forward. And of course, if you want to get your own gaming haul, just head to the links in the description box or in the pinned comment below and check out their very impressive lineup of products for back to school 2024. Bada bing, bada boom. Okay, let's get into Space Marine 2. Now, as I previously alluded to, we got access to 3 missions, a story mission and then 2 different missions that we could play through the co-op system known as Operations. The story mission was actually an extended section of gameplay that we've seen in trailers previously, but we got to play through the whole thing, even seeing some Thousand Suns rubric Marines with flamers, and it all culminated in a big boss fight at the end of the mission. Now, here's the thing. We were not allowed to capture our own footage of the campaign mission. We just weren't allowed to do that. And so in turn, we have to use B-roll that they provided of basically the first half of the mission. Naturally, some people are going to look at that and be like, oh, they're trying to hide something. I don't think that's what's going on here. I think they're just simply trying to not spoil one of the coolest boss fights that we've seen for the game so far, which is what that final encounter was like. It really was the highlight of the story mission and even of the whole preview for me. It was a really cool thing, not to spoil anything, but let's just say there was some warping involved, some discs involved that might be Tzeentch adjacent. I'm sure if you know Warhammer and like Thousand Suns and all that, you know kind of what I'm referring to. But all told, I really enjoyed it. I won't spoil it here because clearly they didn't want it spoiled, which is why they didn't let us get footage of it. But still, I think it was a really cool boss fight, and it's something we haven't really seen. You know, my main concern with Space Marine 2 in the coverage I've done of the game, both here on my main channel and on my second channel, Luke Stevens Live, which you should absolutely go subscribe to, by the way. It's been that I've been worried about enemy variety. It seems like most of the footage that they've shared is of waves and waves of Tyranids and these little bug creatures chasing after you, and I've been worried that that's all the game really had to offer. But I'm happy to report that there actually is a lot more variety here, especially in these story missions. We'll get to the multiplayer here in a little bit, but I do want to say that just in this little vertical slice of about 45 minutes of a story mission, I saw more enemy variety than I think I've seen in the entirety of the promotional materials for the game so far. So if that keeps up, we might be in for a real treat. They did tell us the mission that we were playing through was about halfway through the campaign. So it might be that you play the first half of the campaign just basically dealing with the Tyranids, which are the bug-like aliens. And then the second half of the campaign is spent dealing with the Thousand Suns and Chaos Marines and all of that. I don't really know how they're going to break it down, but all you really need to know, whether you're a fan of Warhammer or not, is that it does seem like there is a good bit of enemy variety here, even mixing up playstyles entirely, where the Tyranids just kind of swarm you and just charge. The Thousand Suns, like rubric Marines, tend to play much more cautiously, stay back and use flamers instead. And that is true to the tabletop game, and it makes for interesting encounters when they mix all of it together. Production quality was top notch as well, with environments looking really, really good. The game also ran very well, except for a couple of very small instances. Namely, if you go into the menus, you can turn off helmet visibility, meaning that you can take off the helmet so you can see Titus's face if you care about that type of thing. And then you can just go back into the menus and turn it back on. However, when I was testing it, I would turn off the helmet, and then no matter what I did, I couldn't get the helmet to go back on. You could go back in the menus, flick it back on, wouldn't do anything. He'd still have the helmet off in gameplay and in cutscenes and stuff. And then you would try like toggling it back and forth. It just wouldn't do anything. The only thing that fixed this was a full-on restart of the game. Again, it's a small issue, not a big deal, but just something that you would think would be really easy to implement and fix, but just a weird bug, I guess. I don't know. It's just odd. Furthermore, there were some issues with audio where music wouldn't play, so we would just go through a 10-minute sequence of gameplay with no music at all, which doesn't sound that disruptive or distracting, but I think when the rest of the game has a really intense soundtrack to then go to complete silence in combat, it's just a little jarring. And then there was another instance where there was like a big explosion as part of a cutscene, and it did that sort of like, you know how in action movies there's an explosion and everybody's ears ring and all the other sounds are really muted, so people are yelling at each other and it's like that kind of thing. That happens in a cutscene, and then after that, for like 20 minutes, all the audio for the rest of the mission was like that. It's like the little audio filter just didn't turn back off after we got out of the cutscene. And initially I thought it was like a creative choice. I thought maybe that's just something they were doing, like you're wearing a helmet, so maybe that's how it sounds. So I tried turning off the helmet to see if that would fix the audio. Like maybe that was just a creative choice. But no, it just seems like it was a bug, because when you go back through the mission again, it works fine. So I don't know what the deal with that was. But again, these are smaller bugs and issues that don't really affect like the fun factor of the game, but they're just kind of annoying, and hopefully they get patched out by the time the game releases on September 9th. And like I said, graphically, the game is really impressive as far as I'm concerned, especially considering how much is going on at any given moment in the game. The one weak point is with faces. When helmets come off during cutscenes and people start talking to each other, the subsurface scattering just isn't very good here, and so everybody's face looks like it's made of paper mache. It's not a big deal. Again, that's not why you're playing this game. You're not playing it for hyper photorealistic skin in cutscenes, but it did feel markedly outdated. But once the helmets go back on, everything looks great. Particle effects, the blood effects, the architecture in the distance, the level of detail in the distance, it's all top-notch and freakishly beautiful, especially if you like the sort of art style that comes with Warhammer. I think you're going to eat it up. But all told, I finished the story mission much more intrigued for what the campaign had to offer than I was before. It's important to note that the game is fairly repetitive, and it does play very similar to the first game, which for some people is going to be a win. Other people, it's going to be like, oh, that's a bummer. But it definitely does play like an old school Xbox 360 game, which is a comparison I'll bring up later as well. Because that really seems to be the vibe that they're striking here. Now, as for the multiplayer stuff, we had 2 missions to play through here. This works very similar to a game like, say, Darktide. In that game, very similar to this game's multiplayer, you select a mission, which is going to be the same no matter how many times you run it, except for when you crank difficulty levels. When you do that, you might run into more difficult bosses or encounters, but you're, at the end of the day, grinding the same missions over and over again, trying to challenge yourself in different ways as you grind up and level up your characters, their weapons, and armor. And as a result, you're going to be playing many of these missions over and over and over again, even in Space Marine 2. The difference between this and something like Darktide is that Space Marine 2 also has a single-player campaign, and it seems like there's a lot more runway on the upgrades in Space Marine 2. Notably, Darktide, when it launched, had a lot of problems with overall content. A lot of people were able to pretty much fully grind characters out in like 30, 40 hours, which I know sounds like a whole lot, but in the context of like a live service game, it's just not enough for a live service game. And they've later fixed that. They did updates and made it much, much better. But it seems like Space Marine 2 has a lot more content day one if you're looking to grind out all 6 classes. And speaking of the classes, there are 6: Tactical, Assault, Vanguard, Bulwark, Sniper, and Heavy. And so in the game's multiplayer hub, you can see that you can actually walk around and you can go up to this, which is called the Armory Hall. And from there, you can select which class you want to play with. Each of these have different loadouts, different weapons available to them, different perk trees, all sorts of stuff like that. For example, if we go to Vanguard and go to the perk tree, we can actually pull this up and see what we can purchase using these little in-game credits up here with the gold currency there. Now, as far as I understand it today, those are not purchasable with real money. I don't know if that will change. I don't know if I've just missed something that said they can be purchased, but as far as I'm aware today, those are only achievable by completing missions within the game. Going back to the skill tree though, you can see that just for the Vanguard class, there are all sorts of upgrades in the perk tree that can be grinded out and purchased as you work your way up in experience. Some of these affect the team, so all squad members deal 15% more melee damage. Others have improved finishers and stuff. Others affect gear, so they give the kick damage an increase of 25%, or diving kicks take 15% more range damage for 10 seconds, things like that, and then signature improvements as well. So there's a lot of grinding and upgrades on that side of it, the actual class side. On the other side, we have weapons, and the weapons themselves, you might have 2 or 3 available for each class. And these also have upgrades that can be leveled up as you work your way through the game and gain more power and expertise with each class and weapon set. Now, where I expect most of the live service elements to this to come in are in the customization and cosmetic side of things. So as you can see here, there are certain relic Secundus armor sets like this one, achieve victory in 37 missions in operations mode, which is the multiplayer mode, or matches in eternal war mode to unlock. In that case, you just grind it out and you can unlock that skin, which is kind of cool. I mean, come on. That's not bad. But then other skins and decals and stuff you can see are locked behind the Ultramarines cosmetic pack with 12 successor chapters, 21 chapter decals, 14 color packs, 3 unique helmets available for all classes and stuff like that. I, as of today, when I'm filming this video, don't know what that's going to be priced at. I don't know. When I click on it to go and see how much it's going to cost, the link just breaks. So I don't know what that will be like, but that is in the game. Personally, I don't think it's a big deal. Like, if you're going to provide us a multiplayer mode with a lot of content, if you want to have cosmetic exclusive stuff, okay, I'm not too worried about it, as long as there's also cosmetic stuff for people that just play the game. And as you can tell, there's a lot of that. If you want to just grind out skins based on what you think looks cool, you can do that. And you can even go down here into custom armor sets and create your own custom armor if you choose to do that. As you can see, some of these skins and colors are locked behind DLC. Others, if we pull this up, you can see can be unlocked separately for different upgrades and stuff. In this case, Blood Angels. If I buy this, I can then buy the color, and then after I've done that, I can then select that color when I'm customizing the character. And so, like, there's ways to do it. How worth it, I'm not really sure. I mean, we just bought this one for like 40, and it's barely different than the red. So I don't know how much runway there is there, but clearly if you want to grind stuff out, there's a lot to be grinded. It's just a matter of whether you think that's worth it or not. But speaking of these classes, I think it's important we bring up how they actually play, because as far as I'm concerned, one of these is totally and just abjectly horrible. Like, totally a waste of space. And that would be this one right here, the sniper class. I'm sorry, maybe I'm going to trigger people by saying this. I don't know why this class is in the game. I think it could be cut and the game would be totally unchanged. And I really hope by the time the game launches next month, there are some major buffs and things they give to this class, because as of right now, they just aren't viable as far as I'm concerned. Let's talk about it. So in Space Marine 2, one of the core things you need to be doing is basically completing finishers. This could be done by quickly parrying an enemy or by breaking them and dealing enough damage that they become vulnerable to a finisher. But when you do this, it will either restore a section of your health, which can be marked in the top left corner with a white bar once you've taken damage, and that damage can be recaptured and regained by dealing a finisher before that white bar disappears. This is similar to the rally system in Bloodborne and encourages hyper-aggressive gameplay. Furthermore, when you complete a finisher, you also gain back a shield cell. Those are the little bars underneath the health bar, and those can be refilled by completing these finishers or by picking up armor enhancement packs, which can be found in crates scattered throughout levels. The problem is that 90 to 95% of all of the finishers that you're going to be doing are completed in close range with a melee attack. The sniper class does have a melee attack. They can do it. However, because they're running with a sniper rifle, 99% of the time you're going to be staying far away from everybody else because you have a bolt pistol, but you don't really have much to deal with hordes swarming you. So naturally you're going to be staying away from everybody. And the special ability for the sniper class is basically popping a stealth boy and then just running away and having 10 seconds of invisibility, which is helpful, but again, not helpful if you're trying to regain your shield or something. Now, I know what you're thinking, Luke, this isn't a big deal. If you're staying back and sniping people, as long as you're dealing enough damage, you can still be helpful to the team. But that's precisely the issue. You see, the sniper rifles that are in the game right now are laughably bad. For the sniper class, you have a couple of options. If you actually want to snipe, you have the Las Fusel or Fuss, I don't know how to say it. This sniper rifle, and then you also have the bolt sniper rifle, and then other than that, you can use a stalker bolt rifle, or you can use a bolt carbine. The sniper rifles, however, don't deal significantly more damage than any other gun in the game. They're just slower and have far less ammunition. You can see by the time you reach relic status and you can unlock one of these, yeah, it's gonna deal 9 firepower and it's gonna have crazy high accuracy and all of that, but it's not significantly better than the other guns used by every other class in the game. And so then that just begs the question, well, then why would you ever use it? So you can shoot farther and more accurately? Sure, but every part of Space Marine 2, in the multiplayer especially, discourages you from staying away from everybody. Everything else in the combat system encourages you to get up close personal and get blood all over your beautiful armor. And so the sniper class just seems to be in direct conflict with the very premise of the gameplay loop in the multiplayer. Like, it just doesn't make any sense. No matter what I did trying the sniper class, I just couldn't get it to be viable. Every other class was just frankly better at everything the sniper would try to do. The camo cloak special ability is cool, and the ability to just disappear and yeet out of there is awesome, but it recharges so slowly that it's just not that practical. I'd much rather use a class like Vanguard that has a grapnel launcher that actually allows you to basically zip Just Cause style over to another enemy to get out of a pinch, or to just pivot around the map. It works way better than cloaking yourself and awkwardly running around a big horde of enemies. Or on the flip side, you also have the Assault class, which has a jump pack to actually leap up in the air and then slam down with a thunder hammer. There just isn't really a reason to ever use the sniper class. And when I'm looking at a multiplayer mode that has 6 classes, it's like, ooh, 6 classes, that's awesome. But as far as I'm concerned, there's only really 5 classes that are even remotely viable. And even then, other classes that are here, like the heavy class, I'm just not so sure are as good as they should be. And so I just think they need a lot more balancing, and maybe we'll get that by the time the game launches. That's part of what I'm sure these videos that are providing feedback aim to do. But I do think it needs a good amount of balance, because the sniper class just doesn't make any sense. And as far as I'm concerned, there's no reason to ever play a sniper. If the sniper rifles did a lot more damage and could basically one tap any big brute in the game and then deal significant damage against bosses, I could see having a sniper rifle with 12 rounds in it being useful, though very, very specialized. But as is, it's just a worse tactical class that has an ability that's also not very useful and doesn't really specialize in anything else. So it leaves you wondering why the hell we're even bothering. Now, having said all of that, once you find a class that you actually do like, you'll get to go in this little hub area and head over to this little spot here where you can interact with it and select which operation you want to choose. And in this case, you have Inferno, and we had Decapitation also available to us. In one, we're setting a trap for the Tyranid Swarm, and in the other, we're trying to slay the Hive Tyrant while deploying charges on bridge supports and all sorts of stuff like that. Really simple concept for missions. They range in gameplay time depending on how high of a difficulty option you select. In the game right now, there are 4 options. There's threat level minimal, threat level average, threat substantial, and then ruthless. As you can see, they expect you to be level 15 for the hardest difficulty, 10 for substantial, 5 for average, and then 1 is, of course, the minimal starter difficulty. Each of these have descriptions on the bottom. As you can see, armory data will be relic, and that's kind of what they expect you to be using for these missions. So there is a good amount of scalability. And I will say that each of these difficulty levels also gives you a chance to play against harder and harder enemies. So if you play through a mission on minimal, you probably are going to encounter nothing but little grunts and little fellas running around, and that's about it. On the average difficulty, you might have 1 or 2 mini bosses as you go through. That'll be a little bit more challenging and can make things more interesting. On the harder difficulties, it's much harder. It's a lot harder. You have to have a high level character to stand a chance in those. I'm just going to be real. We didn't get a chance to really test ruthless or substantial because you just have to grind out a good amount to get to that point. But yeah, there's a lot more that gets thrown at you on those difficulties. But my overall impressions of these missions is that they play very similar to a game like Darktide. You're going to get to know these maps backwards and forwards even after 5 to 10 hours of gameplay. And so it's the difficulty levels where you're actually going to find a challenge. I wouldn't expect this as a multiplayer mode you're going to be playing for years on end, but I do think that it could occupy your weekends for a couple of weeks easily. Of course, we only got access to 2 of these missions, whereas in the game right now, in the menu, we can see 6. And I would imagine eventually these are all going to be filled up with later additions as well. Maybe not. but that would be my suspicion. And 6 isn't bad, but I do think if they're going to try to make this like a really successful live service offering, they'll need more than that. Beyond that, we have the campaign option and Eternal War. Those are locked for us right now once we're loaded into the multiplayer mode, but those will also be options when you get the game fully released next month. And listen, I'm somebody that doesn't tend to play games like this for hundreds or thousands of hours. Like when I play Darktide, I'll play it for a handful of dozen hours and I'll grind out one class that I'm really enjoying and I'll get really, really good at it and hyperfixate on it, which I just tend to do. And then I'll get distracted with another game and I might come back to it later and then hyperfixate again. But I'm not somebody that's going to put like 2,000 hours into a game like this, playing the same levels over and over and over and over again for weeks and months on end. Some people are like that. My buddy Caleb, who actually got me into Warhammer, is really deep into Darktide and he eats it up and he just absolutely loves it. I just am not somebody that can hyperfixate on it for that long of a period of time, but there are people out there. That's just a matter of personal preference. I'll leave it up to you to decide whether this looks intriguing enough to captivate you for that long. However, I will say that looking at it from my perspective as somebody that doesn't tend to put thousands of hours into a game like this, I am having a really good time. I did have a very, very good time over the last few days playing this and trying it and getting acclimated with it. And I could see pouring a good amount of time into the game, honestly. I don't think it'll be for everybody, but I do think that the campaign surprised me with the variety of enemies, with some of the bigger encounters and boss fights. And while parts of the gameplay might be a little bit clunky, while they might feel very like 360 generation in terms of picking up this weapon or this ammo pack or this or that, it does feel fun. And at the end of the day, that's all that really matters, is whether you had fun playing the game. Like I can poke holes in pretty much any game I look at pretty easily, but if you had fun, that's all that really matters at the end of the day. And I brought up the Xbox 360 comparison earlier, and I want to circle back to that because I think in a lot of ways, this game does feel and play like an Xbox 360 game, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. The mission design, the way levels are laid out, the combat being very hack and slashy, focused on gore and brutal finishes first, and finesse and dynamics second, all of it stacks up into a game that feels eerily reminiscent of games that I played as a kid, and certainly very much like homages to the original game. And again, I think that's something that some people will love and other people will find very frustrating. If you're expecting this to be some great innovation in this sort of third person, clunky, chunky combat, you're going to be sorely disappointed. But if you're looking for a fun Warhammer romp in the chaotic Tyranid and Thousand Sun Hay, I think this is going to be a solid offering. It's not going to win Game of the Year or anything, as far as I'm concerned, based on what I've played and seen, but that doesn't mean it's not worth playing. You know, I feel like a lot of the time nowadays, people are like, if it's not a 10 out of 10, it's garbage. And I just don't agree with that. Like, I think a 7 or an 8 out of 10 for many people is well worth the purchase price and can lead to weeks and weeks of fun. Just because there are things a critic can poke holes in and bring up when talking about a game does not mean the game isn't worth playing or supporting. And I think part of the problems we're having across the games industry right now is because those sort of AA games, the games which are good but not AAA or quadruple A masterpieces, I think a lot of those are being left unplayed, or people are just sitting on the sidelines waiting till they go on a deep sale or pop on Game Pass or something, which I totally get. Like, this is a rough time financially for many people, but I do think that if you want to see more games like this that are more experimental or more classic in how they're set up, I think you got to support them when you think that they are solid enough to be supported. And as far as I'm able to tell here, having played a good amount of the game, I think that this is going to be a really interesting one and potentially very solid. Won't be for everybody, but I think it's going to be a really good time, especially if you like Warhammer stuff. Of course, I plan on doing a review for the game once we actually get the full version of it at some point this month, probably, or early September. So I will be sinking my teeth into it a lot when the time comes. But as of right now, I think that this is shaping up to be a really surprising good time, and I'm looking forward to it. Just please, for the love of God, Saber, fix the sniper class, because it's an actual waste of time right now. Just fix the sniper class, and I think we're playing ball. But with all of that said, thank you for watching. Let me know if you're going to be checking out Space Marine 2 in the comments section. Of course, like the video if you enjoyed it and would like to see more Space Marine 2 videos, either here or on my second channel. I usually look to the likes to determine whether people are like really passionate about a given game. So definitely drop that like if you'd like to see more coverage like this. And of course, thank you to the guys over at Focus Entertainment for hooking us up with preview access to the game. I'm really excited to see some of what the rest of the game has to offer. Like specifically, they have the Eternal War mode, which is basically PvP, where you're playing as your own Space Marines fighting each other's Space Marines. And this just seems really fun and wacky and crazy. We didn't get access to it in this event, but that's something I really want to keep a close eye on, because that seems really, really fun. Again, I don't know how viable snipers are, but that could be a sick addition to the lineup. And I mean, can we just appreciate also that this is a single player game that has like a solid campaign as far as I can tell right now. I don't know how long it'll be, but it seems pretty solid. And then they're also throwing in all of this multiplayer stuff. You know, again, it's very reminiscent of like the 360 era of campaign, multiplayer modes, all that stuff coming in at once, and all for the same purchase price. It's not like they're doing the single player for 60 and then multiplayer for 40 or 50, and then everything else is split up and hyper monetized. They're just like, yeah, it's 60 bucks. It's not even a full 70. And if you're interested, you get all of this stuff thrown in the package all at once. It's kind of refreshing, honestly. And I'm just gonna say it, Games Workshop, the guys behind Warhammer, the actual franchise IP, they are known for not exactly being generous with their content offerings. I mean, if you've ever been interested in getting into Warhammer as a hobby, it is freakishly expensive. And so to see them take this more pro-consumer approach to just packing tons of content into a package for 60 bucks instead of trying to milk you at full price for everything, it's, again, really encouraging and refreshing, and it makes me excited to be a Warhammer fan, especially in light of some of the other stuff going on, like the Henry Cavill Warhammer series he's apparently working on, which is going to be awesome. But anyway, I'm going to stop talking because I am bad at outros, and I'll just keep going because I like talking about this stuff. So I'm going to call it there. Thanks for watching. I love you all desperately. Thanks to Best Buy again for sponsoring the video and hooking me up with some sweet, sweet gear. Go check them out at links below. I appreciate the gosh darn heck out of every single one of you. I love you dearly, and I'll see you soon. Hugs and kisses. Bye-bye.